most people know now, but what have we been seeing nationwide and in Austin about the housing market? We're talking these high rates right now, these high interest rates. For those that actually just don't really understand that concept, kind of explain to me a little bit about that.
So anytime the mortgage rate increases, a potential buyer's purchasing power decreases. This essentially means that in order to qualify for the same priced home with a higher rate, the potential buyer then has to actually earn a higher income to be able to qualify for a mortgage loan. So in other words, higher rates constrain potential buyers' affordability. So this means that there are buyers sitting on the sidelines right now who otherwise would have purchased a home but can't just because rates are that much higher and they don't have the income necessary to qualify for a mortgage loan, or they can't find homes within their price point.
And I want to talk a little bit about like what's sort of the factors that make rates possibly go higher?
So the mortgage rate, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is tied to something called the 10-year treasury yield. And in essence, the 10-year treasury note, it's a government bond. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the US government. And it's generally something that's seen as a very safe haven kind of investment. So essentially speaking, the correlation is such that the spread between the 10-year treasury yield and the 30-year fixed rate mortgage average tends to be about 180 basis points. But essentially what we've seen over the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, as the Federal Reserve has been fully entrenched in this rate hiking cycle, is that due to the general economic uncertainty about the direction of rate and the magnitude of increases in the federal funds rate, the spread between the 10-year treasury yield and the 30-year fixed rate mortgage has grown to the tune of about 270 basis points. So it's hovering around 2.7 percentage points. And in essence, this just translates into, of course, higher mortgage rates than we would otherwise expect. But now that the Federal Reserve has announced that essentially its rate hiking cycle is over and it will likely cut rates in 2024, we can anticipate that mortgage rates will continue to decline.
And that was actually my next question. We're actually, of course, seeing that the expectations that it could come down. I want to move into sort of what we're looking like in the Austin, Round Rock MSA Metro. If you can speak to a little bit about, the whole point of the story is talking about, even with higher rates, we're actually still seeing a strong market here. I want to know, it looks like prices are coming down, like those median prices, but also it seems like there's a little bit more inventory too, right? So is that kind of like the perfect storm in terms of, giving more options to buyers even with higher rates?
Buyers right now in the Austin MSA certainly have more options, just respect to greater inventory on the market, right? And that's partially a factor just of homes taking longer to sell. And we're talking on average, number of days on market being about 75 days, which is still fairly low. But we have to remember that we are coming out of a market that was really in a frenzy during the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw unsustainable home price growth to the tune of almost 40% at one point over during the COVID-19 pandemic. So essentially we're in a market now that is kind of in a way correcting itself just due to the exorbitant growth we saw again during the pandemic.
I believe the release had something about a 0.2% increase in sales or something of that nature. Is that month to month? Like, what is it increasing from? Is it like from October to November? Like, what is that looking at?
Great question. So that's a year over year increase. And essentially, it's saying that sales are basically flat compared to November of last year. But that is somewhat meaningful in the sense that mortgage rates in September, October, and November of this year have hovered around 1 percentage point higher than they were the commensurate month last year. And when we think about folks who are purchasing homes, generally speaking, they are locking in their mortgage rate 1 to 2 months prior before closing on that home. So again, higher rates this summer and moving into the fall than we saw last year translated into really no definitive change in sales activity. So indicating that there are still, of course, buyers who want to enter the Austin market.
I got an interesting tweet from someone today that says they just had a 15-year mortgage, they paid it off in 12, but then they found their dream home. So they said something along the lines of like, me and my wife or me and my family decided that you marry the home and date the mortgage. And is that because essentially, what's your advice for homeowners? Is there really, even though right now I know we're looking at it forecasting to go down, but there's always options for refinancing later and things like that. Do you think a lot of buyers kind of have that in mind?
So most homeowners right now are sitting on pretty low mortgage rates. So probably an estimated 3/4 of existing homeowners have mortgage rates somewhere between 3 and 4%. That's a loose estimation, but you get the idea. So I don't necessarily think that refinancing activity will spike when as rates continue to decelerate. But of course, we will see, those folks, especially folks who got that 7.8% mortgage in late October, early November, they'll be the first ones in the door to refinance.
Yeah, and that was kind of my question. Like when we look at like possible refinancing, do you think that might be, we saw the sales, honestly, the 0.2% increase. I mean, that's still an increase. And people that maybe were in like the August, September, October, November, do you think that held true maybe in their minds that like we know, there's always that hope that it'll come down?
I see. Yeah, sorry. I was being obtuse. Absolutely. Yes, there certainly probably is a proportion of buyers who purchased anticipating that mortgage rates would decline in 2024, will decline in 2024, and are planning on refinancing. We'll wait and see what happens, but that's probably a pretty good bet, just given where mortgage rates have already headed, and of course, the Fed's recent announcement that essentially they're planning to cut rates into 2024.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'm good. I think so really it all comes down to sort of that federal yield or that like federal fund compared to like the 30-year fixed mortgage. It's really like a symbiotic relationship between the two. And now we're kind of seeing the federal government's basically announcing like we're kind of done with our rate hike, right? So it
Yeah,
kind of come back into some equilibrium.
right. So the Federal Reserve is essentially saying, inflation is relatively under control. We anticipate that it will continue to decelerate to our 2% target, and we'll reach that hopefully in the coming months. So there's no need to really put, our foot on the pedal with respect to hiking rates. Maybe we can even anticipate some rate cuts just kind of based on, again, how those inflation numbers come in moving into 2024.
Perfect. One thing I want to clarify.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm looking at the release now. So we're talking about the Central Texas housing market experienced a slight increase. Oh, I guess that's all of Central Texas. In residential homes sold across the MSA, rising 0.2% to 2,065 total sales. Down here, it says in the city of Austin section, it says 516 residential homes sold 6% less than November 2022. Is that just Austin alone? Like when we're talking about the Central Texas market report, is that like everybody included? So that's why it's a 0.2% increase?
That's a great question. So Central Texas is broadly just encapsulating the MSA itself. So it's not including, say, San Antonio or Waco or any places like that. It's just the Austin MSA. And then, of course, the city of Austin is just the, I guess, census designated place boundary.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So even though there's a 6% less in terms of the city of Austin, the whole MSA saw that 0.2% increase actually from last November.
That's correct. Right.
Oh, perfect.
So
Okay.
we saw more growth, or the growth in sales is attributable more towards the outlying regions, right, rather than the city itself.
Gotcha. Well, perfect. And then I always end with, did I miss anything that you think needs to be said?
Oh, good question. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think we covered everything with rates. I would say, yeah, just heading into 2024, there's heading into 2024, there's a lot of kind of cautious optimism about the housing market and definitely more hope ahead. I know 2023 was a bit of, a volatile year in some ways, but definitely looking for smoother sailing ahead.